Welcome to Book Club for Movies, everybody, for the week of October 18th. I'm Ryan Miller, and the Prince of Darkness himself, Matt Amberg. Is that why you chose this movie, actually?
I chose it because I thought in the dead center of Rocktober you wanted to get down and rock and roll with the Prince of Darkness. It's time to get some head banging and head rolling, and Lord of the Devil, we're gonna, rock!
I don't get the reference, but now it sounds like Christopher Walken.
I'm not trying to...
So do I, for that matter.
Yeah, not intentional, and there's no references here, my friend.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I chose John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness because I feel like I look like the Prince of Darkness at the very end, like the lady when she's when she's bringing him over. I'm like, I wake up in the morning and I go, pizza face.
Spoilers on Book Club for Movies, where we watch one movie a week, and you can too. And then come talk to us on Facebook and Twitter and podcast at bookclubformovies.com. This month we're doing all of the Halloweeners for Octoberween. This week it is the Prince of Darkness. Matt Amberg, do you have a synopsis for the Prince of Darkness? Matt Amberg, the Prince of Darkness.
Look, I don't know how much you're leaving in, but I really hope it's most of that.
Everything.
Because
it doesn't make any sense that you're saying that right now.
Yeah,
it's all normal.
I hate your magical editing touch. Book Club for Movies presents.
But I don't edit the synopses. I do not. I never have, never will.
Well, fartnoise.com. John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness coming at you an hour and 42 minutes. Written and directed by John Carpenter. Starring Donald Pleasance, Lisa Blount, Jameson Parker, Victor Wong, Dennis Dunn, Dirk Blocker, Susan Blanchard, Ann Yen, and of course, the always inimitable Alice Cooper. Here is your Book Club for Movies synopsis for John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. When an abandoned church belonging to a unique sect is discovered to have bizarre secrets in its basement, a group of graduate students are tasked with deciphering exactly what was found.
Wow, you got all of the bullet points. I have here many notes about, well, if he doesn't say this during the synopsis, I've got to bring it up. So you already brought up Dirk Blocker, Hitchcock from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, of course.
With more hair than we've ever seen before.
Sometimes when I'm watching the movie, I will go through the cast list. I went through the cast list while watching Dirk Blocker on screen, and then saw he was in the film and said, Dirk Blocker's in this?
Wait, what?
He doesn't look that much different, actually. Didn't take.
It's totally. He's a little thinner, and he has a little more hair. He's got a beard.
I don't even know if he's that much thinner. Actually, he seems like exactly the same.
Just the
size.
Hair.
And I've watched the most recent Brooklyn Nine-Nine episodes where he's shirtless on an iPad. So
it's great. It's top stuff.
You gotten that far?
Yeah, we finished it.
Final season is out of this world so far.
Yeah, they did a good job wrapping everything up overall. It's a tops for an ending, and you can only get that when you have
Dirk Blocker.
Dirk Blocker, that's right. I was gonna say when you can only get those kind of endings, I think, when the showrunners have a real solid understanding of both their characters and the limitations in their final seasons, and that they're getting a final season.
Yes. Speaking of Dirk Blocker and Alice Cooper, by the way, actually, did you see the story behind how he ended up in the movie?
No. I just assumed that John Carpenter and him were buddies, or he was around, and they were like,
oh, they were.
Hey.
They met at WrestleMania.
Well, sure. Of course they did. Why? John Carpenter is a pretty well-known wrestling fan.
It's a beautiful sentence to read. John Carpenter met Alice Cooper at WrestleMania, and then Cooper apparently asked to be on set because he wanted to. Cooper very famously has a stage show that could very well incorporate much of the same things that John Carpenter incorporates in a movie of his.
Cooper is a magician. Like, he's legit knows magic, and he does the gore style magic and the horror magic on stage. It's a big part of his.
And apparently one of those bits, we'll get to the bit, but apparently he wanted to be on set for that reason. And Carpenter's like, just be in the movie. So he gets the credit homeless schizo or something like that.
Street schizo.
Street schizo. Yes. Thank you.
Alice Cooper, the street schizo.
Yes. And to maybe keep going with a little bit of backstory which stop me if you've heard this, because you obviously have far more experience with this movie than I do, having never heard of it before you said, hey, let's watch it next week. And apparently this is Carpenter off of Starman and Big Trouble, which I think Starman did a little better than Big Trouble somehow. Starman
was a bigger hit. Jeff Bridges was in it.
Another movie I routinely forget that Carpenter did.
Because it's also not, it's one of the movies that's so off the beaten track for him, you know?
At Big Trouble, you could at least be like, oh yeah, a horror dude did this, you know, but apparently if you don't count that, this Prince of Darkness was his quote unquote return to horror after those quote unquote failures.
Bringing along Dennis Dunn and
you mentioned the regulars last week.
Dennis Dunn and Victor Wong. Donald Pleasance was in this one.
Who was in Halloween?
Halloween,
so Pleasant's
of course.
Been around for a bit. But yeah, and that's the other thing I would probably mention is that this comes after Halloween and The Thing. So he's definitely done. I mean, The Thing might still stand at the top of my Carpenter stable, honestly.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that The Thing is like, you can't argue that when somebody says that's my favorite, that's the best one, you can't argue it. At that point, you're arguing flavor more than quality, because I truly don't think Carpenter did better than The Thing. I think he's done flavor-wise things that people like better, sure. Like, I mean, we've had this discussion. My favorite Carpenter flick, bar none, is Big Trouble.
Right.
But I have no problem also noting it's not his best movie, but that's not the point. You know?
Right. Yeah, I think, okay. And we'll get there too. I think there are some interesting things about Carpenter that will make more sense after we talk a little bit more about this movie. But apparently with those failures, he was disillusioned with the studio system. So this was the first indie that he returned to since Escape from New York, I think it was, which he also did on his own. This was with Alive Studios. Oh, and also I should mention one of the producers, Shep Gordon, was Alice Cooper's manager at the time. So
good old Shep.
Yeah, I know, great name, right? And you correctly pointed out that Carpenter did, in fact, write this as well, even though his credit,
pseudonym, his pen name, Martin Gloucester,
something like that. Yeah. Which, did you read the history behind that?
I know that he had used it forever, for a really long time. He used it on Halloween. I feel like it had something.
Oh, did he also? Really? Oh, okay.
I feel like it had something to do with getting paid, and it had something to do with the studio and his name on it, but I don't know.
Oh, there may have very well been labor reasons behind it. In fact, we just talked about that with somebody. Soderbergh. Actually, I don't know we've mentioned that on the No Sudden Move show, but Soderbergh often does that too.
He DPs or whatever,
and then uses one of his family members' names or something like that.
Yeah.
So the name he uses, Martin Quatermass, actually.
Alan Quatermass.
Yeah, no, it's not a nod at the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's a nod at Nigel Keel, who is a British film and television writer that did some things that Carpenter really loves. But Neil himself was displeased with the homage, fearing that viewers might believe that he had something to do with the film.
Sure.
So as far as homages go, I think that's pretty good.
Anytime you can homage something where the person's like, I really wish
I don't appreciate it.
Yeah. I'm out.
And I guess he did this again for They Live, his immediate follow-up. He was credited as Frank Armitage, which I don't know the history behind that, but you were right in saying that Carpenter does often do this.
Yeah.
And apparently was inspired while researching theoretical physics and atomic theory. He said, quote, I thought it would be interesting to create some sort of ultimate evil and combine it with the notion of matter and antimatter. And then the whole thing was post-produced at Disney Studios.
Because when you think of the Prince of Darkness, you do think of Disney Studios.
You do, in fact. Because, yes, if we were to talk more about this film at some point, we would mention that it is about the Prince of Darkness in every way possible. In fact, I never thought of this because I think oftentimes the Prince of Darkness is thought of as kind of the end all there. Sure. But here they take it all the way. They're like, no, he's the prince. He's trying to bring back his dad. In fact, what do they call his dad in the King? It's not the King of Darkness.
Oh, yeah, it's Jonathan.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll come across it at some point.
But yes. he's trying to release the anti-god. That's what it is.
That's what it is. Thank you. Yes, the anti-god. Yes. which they do set up in the film as well. And it is very much a kind of intersection of science and religion type thing. And it is very interesting for that reason. The sci-fi babble is a little funny because it is 70s-ish, and you get the feeling that, it wasn't one of Carpenter's strong suits besides any of the research he was doing at the time.
It feels 70s-ish, and this movie was made in 1987, which is like...
Very true. He said it was enough, like there was enough tech talk to get the job done, is how he put it. Sure.
I mean, the main phrase that you hear repeatedly is tachyon.
Tachyons, yes.
They involve tachyons, and all I can think now is, well, maybe John Carpenter should direct a Marvel movie since they're all tachyon based now as it is after Endgame. Could you imagine John Carpenter's Marvel presents, Drax the Destroyer or something?
I wish, if I ever wished that the Marvel movies would falter in a greater way, it's so that we could get some kind of more films. Like, it's so we could regress completely to like the first Captain America and Punisher movies,
love it. I would love it so much. It'd be amazing.
Alas, they keep making good ones.
Haha, look at us. We've got money for costumes. Screw you, Roger Corman.
Is Corman still alive?
I believe he is. Yeah.
I mean, does he ever die? I guess would be the better question.
He will never die. He's much like Lloyd Kaufman. It's a guy that even when he dies, they're going to prop him up in his office and still be using recordings of him yelling at people and saying, "Here's why Toxic Avenger is the greatest movie ever."
I feel like we just started writing a Carpenter film, actually.
I would John Carpenter doing a biopic on Lloyd Kaufman would be amazing. Keeping in mind, John Carpenter has done biopics before. You may remember one of his early movies was a TV movie called Elvis, starring Kurt Russell.
Oh, right. That one I actually did know because strangely enough, when we were doing our thumbnails for 0 Hit Points and we went through the Kurt Russell phase, I had to pull a still from that, which was harder to find than most. So
it's not easy.
So yes, the Prince of Darkness. It takes its time, let's say. It's a slow burn, but in a way that I think helped me to understand why this is a thing amongst horror films. And I don't know how prevalent it was at this point, like you said, in 84, 87. But I know that he is also quoted as saying that it came about because of all of the derivative stuff he said he saw in the genre at the time. And I don't have the breadth of knowledge to rattle some of those off. Like, what can you think of any derivative horror titles from the 80s that he might be reacting against?
I mean, it's the problem is, but it's like, it's one of those moments of every movie that came during the 80s, especially during the horror craze. It was a ton of crap. I mean, there is a metric ton of cult films that for reasons agreeable or not, kind of hit a certain pantheon, and okay, you're fine. But the amount of just absolute true garbage that's out there that is directly derivative of his work. I mean, for example, Terror Train. That's a great example.
It comes back again.
200% derivative of Halloween. Like, that is a straight Halloween ripoff. They just went, how do we move it? Let's put it on a train. Okay, Halloween on a train, go.
Which is what makes that statement so interesting to me, is because the only thing I could think of when he said that is because this is when the VHS boom is happening. We've talked about that VHS shelf numerous times in terms of horror and action movies, which I think are probably the two standout genres when it comes to that VHS shelf.
Sure.
So it was incredibly funny to me that he would be reacting against the derivative films that were deriving from his previous incredibly strong work.
Yeah.
And also because this movie, Prince of Darkness, bombed and would itself find new life on the VHS shelf.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
So yeah, this is one of it is also one of those, like, I was angry about the derivative work, so I wanted to make a better movie myself. I mean, how many directors could you, like, every director says that, I think, at some point. They're like, well, everything out right now is real derivative, so I wrote something that I wanted to see.
Sure, yeah. And honestly, I can never tell in researching what pieces of history I'm pulling from marketing spiels and commentary tracks and stuff, because there actually is a fair amount on this. In fact, I think the DVD comes with a big old bunch of extras and featurettes and looking back and stuff like that. So I never know, it's like I said, I never know if I'm pulling from the marketing stuff from the time, or if I'm pulling from Carpenter in a commentary reel being like, oh, it's just babbling. That part doesn't matter, like whatever.
Yeah.
Which is also what I think is interesting about Carpenter, kind of what I hinted at before, and I'll just bring it out now, is because when he isn't doing just perfect movies in a way, like stand the test of time classics like Halloween, like The Thing.
Yeah.
He's doing something like this that I don't even know if I'd call it a departure or an experiment, more than I'd call it a premise with the whole quantum physics meets religion thing, and then grossing you out for 90 minutes. Like Carpenter's so interesting in that way. And I guess he doesn't shy away from the gross outs in The Thing for that matter either. But maybe it's the fact that this is such a slow burn makes it seem like, it does work because the sense of kind of impending doom or oppressiveness of this film is all encompassing. And it's one of those things that builds that, like,
it is palpable.
45 minutes into it, you're like, why do I feel like this, even though nothing's happening? And yeah.
And okay, so I want to kind of take a branch off of what you just said, and I kind of mentioned this at the last show about there was reasoning behind me choosing this, and the history I have with this movie is less the educational or the academic history, like the stuff we're talking about with the backgrounds and all that, and it comes more from I was 7-8 years old when I saw this movie, 7-8ish, and I had already had I was at that point, like kind of where Evelyn's at, where you kind of you dip her toe in the water, right, and you find out where she's comfortable. And my dad was very similar. He was like, I'll watch, try this, So I had already been given quite a decent history lesson at this point, for sure, in terms of horror. I had already seen Nightmare on Elm Street. I'd already seen The Thing. I was, by 8 years old, I was well versed in the blood and guts of what was coming out on a standard 80s movie, and it was just not a concern. Like, for my dad, film was always more of a discussion piece and less of something he ever wanted to censor. Obviously there were levels, but the levels were he'd rather have the conversation with me about none of this is real, and here's why none of this is real, and them having it's not real, and the death isn't real. And so I had a pretty good education at this point, and I was still like, this isn't to say I didn't get scared. Of course I got scared. Horror movies are meant to scare you, right?
Well, that's why I'm interested in this story, because I feel like you don't get scared that often even, but the story you shared with me about this movie in particular has my interest piqued.
Yeah. So this movie, seeing it for the very first time at home was unnerving. I was terrified from start to finish. This movie, more so than so many others, stuck with me for decades. Like, it still is something that, when I have certain nightmares or I think of things that are horrifying, that scare me, images from this movie pop up into my head frequently. Like, this movie, visually, conceptually, all of it really hit me at a formidable time where it embedded itself in my brain. And I was horrified. This movie, it was one of those moments where I couldn't take my eyes off the TV. I couldn't move from the couch that I was sitting on in a pitch black night where it's dark out, it's quiet, it's later in the evening, everything is closed up, there's no lights in my house, my mom is asleep, the dogs are asleep, it's just me and my dad sitting on the couch, two different spaces altogether. Like, for me, the space between my dad and me was like an ocean, right? Like, I am on this island that John Carpenter is just needling me. And keeping in mind the timing of the film in the 80s, this movie definitely has things that are not great now, that don't hold up in terms of, some of the dialogue is not, number one, it's poorly written in some cases. Some of it's awfully sexist, and you get some of that stuff. But again, it's a product of its time.
Yeah, I've seen some favorable reads on that I don't necessarily connect with. That there's apparently John Kenneth Muir says that it's kind of a parable for the AIDS epidemic, because one of the characters has some, I don't know if they're homophobic, but at least some,
he's gay.
At some point he points out somebody comes out of a closet or hides in a closet. It's a very zeitgeisty read. Like,
sure,
I respect it for that reason, but I don't really.
I
think it's a bit much.
It actually, I'll come back to that and why I think that read is probably more right than it's more wrong.
Okay, so that's unrelated to what you're talking about right now.
Yeah. But
Okay.
taking the little bits out and all that, that are just the movie itself from a visual standpoint, it is like the film, however it was filmed, whatever grade it was filmed at, whatever with the grain, whatever millimeter, but it is also a matter of the set pieces, the lighting, where it was shot. They made that chunk of what I think is probably Los Angeles.
It is.
They made the one little part of that church, like, that is a scary thing. When you pull out and you see the whole church, especially at the end, which again, we're going to spoil a movie, when you see everything at the end, with the police and everybody is around the church and it's just a normal neighborhood, it's nothing. It's
a couple blocks from City Hall in LA, apparently.
Which, I mean, it looks basically the same, also horrifying. Yeah. But it is the way they framed it, and the way they built out the alleyways. The alleyways scared the crap out of me when the seemingly homeless people that are now, some of them covered in crickets and beetles and other creepy crawlies, are just standing at the entrances and the exits to the alleyways. You can't get out of them. So the people are stuck in this church. Horrifying. The entire look of the internals of the abandoned church, it looks like, oh, this church hasn't really, it's not dilapidated, but it's also not been upkept. And the feeling there was so unnerving to me. And then we get to the homeless people start attacking and interacting with people.
Well, so the first interaction with the homeless people happens pretty early on when Alice Cooper stabs the first guy with a half of a bike. That moment is, you see it coming, right? You can kind of see it coming. He's walking towards him with the thing. You have to see it, actually, because I feel like just saying that phrase, stabbed him with a bike, like, you can't envision like that. How does that even work? Was it one of the handlebars or what? Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, it was all of that. And then, the big jump is there is some makeup work that just with the lighting turned my stomach. It scared the living hell out of me. And the mirror stuff with her, I had serious nightmares about mirrors and the woman and her face and the hand coming through and then the water on the other side of the mirror. And me, I constantly was going, what is on the other side of mirrors? What if there's something in this whole, there's a whole nother world that is my world that's not my world. I don't, and it was all just so scary. And the thing that tops it off is actually the sci-fi bit, where I think more than anything, it just helps solidify something that I enjoy in storytelling. But the sound and the look of the tachyon transmission that's being beamed into their brain from the year 1999, the vocals on it are just like that whole concept of, we are telling you something is coming. We're telling you, we're trying to tell you, you can fix this, but we can't tell you while you're awake. We can only do it through this really specific way of trying to get information across, and you're never going to believe it, but it's real. And that was another piece that just, the whole thing, when you put this puzzle together, was like every little thing that could bother me was right there. It was all of it. And it did a great job of it. And even now, even when I watched it just this past time, I had told Beth, she hadn't seen it in forever. The most recent time I remembered seeing it, she was not home. And I wanted to say The last time I saw it was about 10 years ago when we moved into the house, and she was still living in Washington. She hadn't moved out yet. I was here alone. I had a cot, I had a TV, I had my Xbox, and I watched this movie, and I didn't sleep that night. Like I was and sure enough, this last time I watched it, man, like I know what's coming, and it's still,
of course, yeah.
The visuals, especially as the movie ramps up towards the end, where he's in the closet, he's watching them, and they're standing still, and the whole thing, like, absolutely still gets me. And now jumping back to the discussion about the AIDS thing, and actually as a read, now I would love to hear Carpenter outright say no. Until he says no, I have a hard time not kind of reading that, especially as I've gotten older, because this movie, Prince of Darkness, is part of a trilogy. There are 3 movies that just like the Cornetto trilogy, how they're unofficially connected.
I saw this, man, and I don't even know if I buy that trilogy. Really, it seems very strange.
This has been a thing forever, and thematically they fit. Thematically, they all work together. They all tell a similar story. The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. No, it's called the Apocalypse trilogy.
I know, but it just,
thematically, every single one of them discusses serious, like you can easily read serious things into them, but they all thematically revolve around hubris of people and the end of the world because of it. The Thing being, if the Thing gets away, if the Thing gets off of Antarctica, the world is over. That's done. With Prince of Darkness, if the anti-god is released, end of the world. In the Mouth of Madness, same thing. It's the use of media and storytelling and just outright lies that can come to life and destroy everything around you. And at the time, like when In the Mouth of Madness came around, I think, funny enough, it fits more now today thematically and story-wise than it did then. I think it's kind of a prescient film in that respect. So all of these,
it's been a long time since I've seen.
Come on, Sam Neill, man. It's the true Odin. If I remember correctly, he was the Odin in the play that was when they were doing the Thor play. You know, like Damon was Loki. Matt Damon was Loki.
What?
You don't remember this from Thor?
No.
Where Matt Damon
recent?
No, it's in Thor. It's in the Thor movies.
Oh. Gotcha.
That when they're doing the play within the play, or the play within the movie.
Within the play. Yes.
Yeah. Sam Neill.
The Hamlet moment.
Yes.
Of Thor.
Last Action Hero. Oh.
Okay.
Also, Last Action Hero is streaming right now, just so you know.
Oh, thank you. Yes, a fantastic, also prescient film.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a list of scenes, because the way I read it was that I thought, because that thing you let me know that I was surprised by was that you had a nightmare from a horror movie. So I was trying to pick out what might have been the exact thing that gave you a nightmare, but it sounds like if there was an exact thing, it was maybe the mirror stuff. But just overall, my best guess was the moment where Windham is outside all alone in the parking lot with his weird robot voice as he slowly dissolves into bugs because he's made out of bugs or whatever.
It's also horrifying, by the way.
That was my best guess, yeah. Because it's not even like maybe the worst image, because the girl by the end, the actual Prince of Darkness, looks pretty bad.
Yep.
You know, skin falling off and all that.
Pizza face.
Yeah, it does actually look very reminiscent of Pizza the Hut, now that you mention
it. At the end of the movie, she ate herself to death.
That still grosses me out, man. Even in Spaceballs, where he like takes somebody eats a piece of him or
something. Yeah. The robot guy.
It's not like cheesy texture. It's like runny cheese off his face. I'm like, that's not even. Doesn't look like appetizing cheese.
He goes, "You're delicious." Like, what?
Okay, so I was wrong on that, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. Also, just to tie up the Alice Cooper stabs a guy with a bike scene, apparently that also came about from one of his stage acts at the time. In fact, no, I think he had been doing it since 73, but I guess he impaled a lot of things on stage. But the one you hear about most often is when he would bring out a bunch of baby dolls on stage and run around stabbing them and apparently hoisting the heads like a triumphant Viking now and then.
I mean, it's what we did in high school too.
But yeah, it sounds like you were reacting to something that Carpenter has also said. He hasn't rejected the AIDS allegory, but he has said that he did set out to make something, quote, atmospheric and dreadful, which I don't know that you could say many of his other films weren't that, but I think in the way that this is maybe a slower one of those, it does maybe emphasize that a little bit more. Because for as much as doesn't happen sometimes, I wouldn't take any of those parts out. Like it's necessary to, I think, what he was trying to do and succeeded at, obviously.
I don't think it has a ton of fat to it. It's I mean, it moves along. Yes, it does go at a slower clip, but I feel like he does a really good job of pacing that where you're not bored. You know, I feel like he's constantly giving you breadcrumbs and little bits of things to go, okay, well, that's weird. Like, you know, the early on in the film, as they're translating, Ann Yen is brought. She's one of the college students. So it's basically what you have is Donald Pleasance is a priest of some type who has been alerted to this church that has been abandoned, and that something is up with it. And he sends off a typewritten mail to Victor Wong's character, who's a professor at a graduate college, and says, I got this weird thing and I wanted to show it to you. I want to talk to you about it. And he explains that this sect called the Brotherhood of Sleep, I think is what they're called.
I believe so, yes. Because the thing you mentioned as the communication from the future is a shared dream that they all have where, so by the way, you mentioned the voice to it and everything. That's John Carpenter's voice, but it's also made by, he recorded the shot of a figure in the front of the church doorway and then played that on a TV, CRT at the time, and then filmed that shaky cam.
That's brilliant. That is so smart in how to make that work, because that whole visual is just, again, unnerving to me.
Yeah, something that people would do with computers for millions of dollars now. He was like, what if I just shoot it how I want it to look?
What if I shoot it and then record the dailies?
Basically.
Got it. Wrap.
Also, I'm talking over it, but it sounds pretty good. Just take it in.
Just take it. It's good.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were going somewhere.
Yeah, no, so these students are all brought in with various skills in you know, all over the place. You're not really given like this isn't a typical movie nowadays where every single one of those characters would get 5 or 10 minutes of weird backstory to tell you who they are and how good they are at what they do. No, they're all just students that we're accepting that they're students, graduate students, and they're good at what they do. But Ann Yen at the beginning is tasked with taking this book that is ostensibly the Order of the Sleep's kind of Bible, but it has a whole mess of translations to be done with it, where the languages differ. They change like just rapidly throughout. There's a whole bunch of numerics in there that don't make sense.
Equations.
Yeah. And so one of the things they do throughout the movie is early on anyways, is we keep going back to her translating more and more of it. And it gets deeper and deeper into the Satan and the Lord of the Prince of Darkness and all this stuff and the anti-God. And I love that because they do Carpenter does a fantastic job here of keeping things going while continuously giving you information about what they're learning. So you're on the same page as them. And it gives you enough with the characters where you're like, okay, none of the characters are inherently jerks. None of them are bad people. They're just normal people for all intents and purposes. So when they start getting picked off, it's not well, I'm glad that person died or that person deserved it. It's like, none of these people, they had a weekend, man, and they're at a church and now they're getting butchered. And we go into this, the discussion about what they found, and ultimately they find, and this I think is where the movie diverges for people. People go, okay, I'm into it, and I'll see it through, or they immediately go, I can't deal with the concept of a liquid that's sentient. Like that's
Oh, that's where people are drawing the line.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, it's
Okay.
that the liquid is sentient, and so the liquid is ostensibly either the extension of the Prince of Darkness himself or the anti-god himself. I was never real clear with it. I thought it was
no, but I think it's the Prince of Darkness because
Right.
it at one point, I mean, it's dripping against gravity all the time, and in fact, when it gets into people's mouths is when things really go bad for people. But then it like all dumps into, oh gosh,
Lisa's mouth,
possibly?
yeah, and she becomes.
I love all the names because honestly, even the first half of the film, like the first one to get infected, I think is Susan, and she kind of goes around like body snatching people. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like Susan, the Prince of Darkness, for the first 45 minutes or so. But then yeah, it all goes into Lisa, and then once her body absorbs that, she is the embodied Prince of Darkness, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
So,
And there's that moment, man, where she's pregnant and her like body is like
Yes.
undulating and making
I
squishy
was
noises.
very
Ugh.
afraid of a Prince of Darkness baby birth for a
Ugh.
second there, but her body just absorbs it and she becomes the Prince of Darkness. So dodged a bullet there, maybe.
but I think that is one of those. It's the problem becomes that suspension of disbelief, even with horror films, where you're like, okay, I can deal with a demon. That makes while it makes no sense, it makes perfect sense.
It's very strange.
But the sentient liquid that, and again, as you think about it, during 1987, the AIDS crisis is like we're hitting a peak of it here. It's yeah, all right. I can, if Carpenter doesn't come back and say absolutely not, I can absolutely see how this could be allegorical towards the AIDS epidemic in general. So
Sure. I mean, I shouldn't discount Carpenter. I mean, I shouldn't make that mistake, that film 101 mistake, that especially for the horror genre, which was, I feel like, born with subtext. Like,
100%. Yeah.
Shouldn't be so quick to discount it, probably. But.
And I mean, look, I'll be the first to say that I am definitely a person who absolutely feels that when it comes to, and you can argue this, we're not going to have this argument now, but when it comes to film and it comes to subtextual use of true actual pain, suffering, things that matter, I think horror films are unique in that they do it better than anything else can, because there's nothing holding horror back. You can't do certain things in drama. You can't do it in comedy. You can't do certain things. But horror,
I see what you're saying.
Horror has the unique ability to be scary, poignant, depressing, hilarious, all of those things. And it's with that where you'd be surprised, I think, more often than not, by this dumb idiot B movie that doesn't appear to be saying anything. But if you think about it and then you listen to the director and he says, oh yeah, well, I wrote it and I was thinking about this. Okay, I get it. So until Carpenter would come back and say no, I can see that. I can see it being relative to that, related to that being.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, you got me. I'm converted.
But again, going back
to
to this particular movie, I think that it's that the green gel is a little hard to get past. But if you can, it's no different than the ghost that can possess somebody, right? It just
seems like such a weird like I've got some of the reviews because I think they're extra funny, and
okay,
none of them mention the green stuff. Like that just seems like a weird thing to have about a film like this, but. Maybe it's from people that don't understand that that's why horror's so good, because it can do anything, which honestly, I had never thought about it like that. That's actually pretty intriguing that it's funny. Like, I feel like I love where that conversation might go, because it does get also wrapped up. I mean, there's the functional side too, where John Carpenter's trying to make something that looks pretty gross or freaky or whatever. There's the creative side to it, but also that it gets wrapped up in the horror, the stuff that does make people feel uneasy because they are uneasy with death or skin being inside out or whatever, stuff that you probably should be uneasy with, but I guess for me, maybe just from a film point of view too, knowing that it's all fake and stuff like that, that's how I mean, I guess I'm lucky coming into this when I did, because I can watch stuff like this and not, in fact, I slept pretty darn good last night.
True.
And I stayed up till I was about to say, man, these Halloweeners are rough because I usually watch the movies at like midnight on a Sunday. So the fact that I would be watching this movie at midnight on a Sunday and finish up at 2 a.m. probably isn't good, but no, slept pretty good. But because if I had seen this when I was your age, I don't know if I would be here right now. Essentially, like E.T. gave me nightmares. That's the movie I remember that caused me not to sleep. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you.
It's a good movie. It's fine. It's not my favorite Carpenter. It's not even, I wouldn't even, if somebody's like, what must see, somebody that shouldn't be asking me what must see horror movies must they see, I wouldn't include this one, but that's still fair. You know, it's fun.
I included it this time because for me, it was a must see, and it has, you know, I've got that connection to it, and I felt like I hadn't seen it in a while. And so I do want to quickly wrap up the story of the film overall. I do really love the tachyon transmission, the dream thing. We did talk about this briefly, but it does get mentioned a couple times throughout the film where the Brotherhood of the Sleep, or whatever the sect is called, they also had those same dreams or similar dreams that were somehow related. But anybody who's within a certain radius and then together, they all are going to share the dream, is how it's explained. And as the movie progresses, we get little, I don't want to call them interstitials because they're not, but then it's the best word I can think of the actual clips, because it's like they don't.
The shared dream stuff.
We get the shared dream suddenly, and then they're awake.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I think pretty routinely it cuts to the shared dream, and then it cuts to them being frightened awake or something like that. In fact, a lot of times it'll cut to them being frightened awake, and then something else will actually frighten them awake. You know, that old trick.
Yes. Yes. But as the film progresses, that story, the visual, the video that we see grows. It gets longer and longer, and then eventually finally changes at the end. We get the full video, and it's slightly different than it was at the beginning, basically because of who's in the doorway. So I love that. The whole concept of the mirror thing, like I actually really, really love that he has her. So the Prince of Darkness realizes to bring the anti-god into this earth or into this world, they have to come through a mirror. And it starts with the Prince of Darkness, who's Kate, Susan, whatever her name is. I don't remember.
Yes.
Lisa. She realizes or knows that how to do it because she looks at a compact. And I loved that whole, like the idea that a demon or something would try anything. And there's something terrifying about the idea of the compact giving the briefest glimpse into whatever hell that is. That's also very horrifying to me.
It was at the moment I was
it's
kind
a little
of
cheesy,
stoked that all the ladies were getting the heavy lifting, and then like it's like she catches her reflection in a compact and is like, oh, you know, it was almost like a scary movie.
Maybe moment. It's Maybelline.
But then they made good on it. Yeah, in fact, if you're building up to that final shot where, because she goes to a larger mirror to pull the anti-god out, is that where you're headed?
Yeah.
Steal your thunder.
No. Keep going.
But I absolutely didn't see that moment coming, because in fact this 5-minute chunk here might be pretty emblematic of the film, because it is a little clumsy in spots, and I don't think it's just a product of the time. It's just that he kept in some of those funny, like there's lots of gonna get you scares kind of out of nowhere.
Sure.
And one of the main girls is walking down the hall towards that final room, and one of the other guys is on the floor having been knocked out. And as she's walking by him, he kind of springs up and tries to grab her feet, and she just jumps over him and is like, "Oh," you know. It's really like I would have done that to my daughter. It's, you know, it was really funny. But then it's followed up by her running into the room and seeing, she has to choose between her boyfriend getting killed by an infected demon dude and the Prince of Darkness pulling her dad out of a mirror. And I thought she was just going to choose the Prince of Darkness and, like, you know, knock the handshake out of the way. But she jumps into the mirror with the Prince of Darkness. And then it's that final shot where she's kind of sinking in the water with her hand outstretched back towards the mirror, like she's trying to. beautiful, like
Loved it.
really good looking stuff there. But yeah, just set up against a funny little scare in the hallway. It's kind of
it is. It's a weird movie in how it sets all that stuff up, but I think that ultimately the movie pays off on almost all of its promises. And and ultimately, I think it tells a fun, unique twist on the story of the Antichrist and how bringing the devil to the earth and all that stuff. I think it's a fun story. It's a cool John Carpenter.
It's a fun story.
It is. It's a fun story. It's a fun John Carpenter.
This is why I love doing these shows. This is why I love wieners.
I love wieners because they're fun. I love wieners because they're fun.
You want to hear the dirty review for this thing?
Let's hear a dirty review, and then do you have any dumb trivia for this? Because it feels like
I do actually. How'd you know? I haven't done that in a bit.
This feels like it should have some.
It feels like it should. It's scary trivia too, is what makes it extra fun for the holiday.
Spookies.
So, in his review for the Washington Post, Richard Harrington wrote, "At one point, Pleasance vows that it's a secret that can no longer be kept. Here's another. The Prince of Darkness stinks. It too deserves to be shut up in a canister for 7 million years." I don't even care. He should be proud of that sentence.
It's good. It's very good. I can respect it.
And then the bad trivia. Okay, are you ready? IMDb sponsored bad trivia. They have a trivia section, and it's all bad. It's not all bad. Actually, there was a pretty good one. But this one is bad and scary. And the trivia reads, "The green swirling goo is anti-God's son, not anti-God himself."
Well, asked and answered.
Which is scary. I'll tell you why. Because it's neither. It's a movie. Like, I don't think this counts as trivia if it's like in universe, right? Like, I feel like the guy's like, well, actually, that's no, it's not. It's and number one, that was very easy to understand in the film, but also it's not really, like, neither one exists. I don't think. Very scary for that individual who wrote that, or just, I don't know, generally speaking.
I like that you're taking that one on similarly to how they do it on How Did This Get Made when they do their second opinion. You're like, that guy knocking it out of the park.
No, if only we had a Mantzoukas about us, a Mantzoukas to watch over us.
The Massachusetts Mantzoukases.
Oh, and regardless, altogether, trivia included, 7 million stars every year gets a star.
Every year gets a star out of 6,999,999. I don't know, whatever. One star less than 7 million.
If we learned anything from the movie, it's that math is hell.
That's true.
Come back next week for the fourth in a series of wieners.
It's the fourth. We were leading into our giant, supersized finale.
Super wiener?
Our super ween. Next week's Halloween movie. We're going to go a little lighter, bring your kids. It's a PG-13 movie. This one's directed by the David Sandberg, who you may remember as the director of the fantastic Shazam.
I was going to say, okay.
And Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods. We are going to watch a little film called Lights Out.
I just figured it out at the last minute. Okay, yeah, we almost did this last year, and then we didn't.
We did. And I don't remember why. There was other things.
We had other things to do. What can you say? All right. So come back next week for Lights Out. And is there some confusion about what Lights Out we might be talking about? That sounds like a common movie
from
title.
2016.
Okay, 2016.
Yep. It is out there streaming. I think it's available on Hulu right now. So check that out. It's not that old of a film, 2016. So
okay, all right. Well, there you go. Yeah, it does sound to me like something that would be on current streaming services, like an easy get, you could say.
It should be an easy get.
Not having seen it, but will have seen it by next week. So come back for that. Podcast at bookclubformovies.com, Facebook and Twitter, etc., etc. Matt, do you have any other movies you want to talk about for the rest of the show?
Yes, I do have a movies that I will talk about for the rest of the show.
Okay.
It is a movie that is on, I believe it's on Hulu is where we watched it. It definitely is streaming. It's called Save Yourselves. Have you heard of this movie at all?
I have not.
So it has mostly actors in it that I don't know. You're not really gonna be familiar with anybody, but you might recognize Sunita Mani.
Mm-hmm.
She is funny as all hell. She was, if you watched Glow, she was on Glow. She pops up on, she was in my favorite TV show right now, Dream Corp LLC. She's been around for a little while. She's definitely typically a little more of a B player. Like she's not, she was on, actually she was on Mr. Robot. She was on like 17, 20 episodes of it.
Must have been a later season. I'm not sure I went past.
She played the character.
Second
she
season.
played the character of Trenton. She was also on The Good Place for a couple of episodes.
All right. I don't recognize her, but
I think she's very funny. She has some really great facial expressions and some really good delivery. So the movie Save Yourselves is a...
Amy Sedaris is in Save Yourselves.
She is briefly.
Lead with Amy Sedaris.
Always. It is a kind of comedy. It's more of a comedy than a horror movie. But essentially it is these two people that live in like New York or something. They are like, the movie starts with them in their relationship, sitting on a couch, looking at each other's phones. Like they're just looking at their phones. Then they start like,
Good.
oh, it's time to, like, hey, let's get a little freaky. Let's have a little, little love to, and then it gets sidetracked by a phone call, and then they're back on their phones. And that's kind of the relationship. It's one of those things where the relationship isn't going as well as it could. They're given an opportunity to go stay at a friend's cabin. He was like, yeah, I just cleaned it up, and we were just out there. Go, spend some time out there. You can do this. So they go out to this cabin, they turn off their phones, and in the process of turning off their phones and getting the cabin, something happens in the world. There's things coming from the sky.
You mean something happens.
Something happens. And there are these little like puffballs that kind of show up. They're bigger than Tribbles. So if you think of Trouble with Tribbles, Star Trek.
I do often.
Think about what a Tribble looks like, but grow it to the size of like maybe a basketball, or slightly bigger than a basketball.
This sounds like Attack the Block a little bit.
They're not as big as those, and they don't move that way. So the way they move is pretty interesting and entertaining, and I'm not going to give that away because it's very funny the first time you see it. So anyways, the movie it's a super kind of sweet movie about relationships and trusting each other, and how relationships can get rocky, and they can, and not just rocky, but like, it's not even about that so much as it's almost like that relationships sometimes can feel stagnant, and you just get into your own, you get into kind of your rut, and rut's not necessarily the right word, but you get into like your routines, and that is life. And this is the movie of those characters going, we're in their routine. Let's get out of the routine. And then they're forced out of the routine. And it's done in a pretty smart way. The filming is pretty brilliant because it's small cast. So they're not like, all the money is going into the right places. The film looks great. I highly recommend it. I thought it was a really sweet, entertaining film. Like I said, it's rolling on Hulu. The kids won't like it, but actually, Candy might like it. Candy might actually enjoy it. There's no
Satanism or
no Satanism. It's no.
I'm just kidding. So with movies like this, having you describe it that way, I have to ask how close it approaches the gold standard, which would be Shaun of the Dead, of course, where I feel like there is an otherworldly event that happens amongst kind of normal relationship isms, and the movie then has to deal with both simultaneously throughout the film. How does it do that balancing act on a scale of 0 to Shaun of the Dead?
I would say a good solid 6 or 7.
Okay.
It's not as I understand.
It's Shaun of the Dead's, yeah, it's at the top. Yeah, I get you.
I understand how you're doing the comparison, and for that comparison, I think it holds its own. In the comparison of, is it nearly as funny or good? No, it's not. But I think it's
on a scale of like 0 to, I was gonna say maybe World's End or something like that. Yeah, but World's End, the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, then this movie.
Oh
would
yeah,
be
then
like
it's
a 9
above
or-
that. It's beyond wherever.
Well, there you go.
I would think you'd start at World's End at the bottom then. From World's End to
right.
10. I know I really enjoyed it. I think that the movie was worth the time. Beth thought it was cute. Highly recommend give it a watch.
Cool.
It's
Cool,
an hour and a half, and it fits the Halloween motif without being super Halloweeny. You know, it's
Sure.
definitely lighter. So
Halloween Kills in theaters
God,
last Friday, technically, I guess.
man, I really want to see it. I don't know if we're gonna get to it or not.
Who knows? Because at this point, it's after it's come out. So
Well,
you know,
I just don't know if we're gonna if we're at a point where
That's-
we'll go back to the theater again. Like
that's
it's
what it is. Hey, how's your Alamo Drafthouse doing, by the way? Actually,
It's open.
okay, that's like we've talked about how much I sometimes dislike my local theaters, but to hear that Regal Cinemas or AMC's are going out of business here and there, I don't like. They've been ripping me off for years or whatever. But when I hear about Alamo Drafthouses dropping, I start to worry. So
Part of that was they built. So they did build a bunch of them, and a few of them they even said
they were right in the middle of expanding. I want to say, yeah.
Well, but they even said they were like, we put this here thinking this was not a good spot for it. It was just they did so they
okay.
they have closed a few, but it's not like they're not on a massive closure hike or anything like that. Not at all.
Excellent. All right. Any other movies you want to talk about?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
What you got?
I don't necessarily have a movie to talk about, but I feel like the strongest man in the world that I haven't even mentioned it yet. And many, many other people have mentioned it, and I have mentioned it to you actually off mic, but the fact that I haven't mentioned, I want to do a show on it. I've seen it 2 times already. You've heard reviews that it's not bad, but my mind gets racing at some very specific moments. And this is the other problem. I haven't listened to any other podcasts on this movie to be like, how many other people are figuring this out, and it doesn't matter. But I saw Free Guy. Yeah, you didn't know that one was coming, did you?
It is. It's cute. I'm ready to watch it. We could do it first show after Halloween. I'm super into it. Yeah, absolutely.
That
200%.
is exactly what I'm telling you right now, because I don't think I ever put my foot down about doing a show, but after the second viewing,
no.
And it's going to be dumb. Like, I'm going to spend time on just really the dumbest things at the middle of this movie.
I legitimately am excited for that because it has been sitting in my queue like, hey, come.
With a Ryan Reynolds voice, I would imagine.
And every time, hey, come watch my movie. Every time I try to watch this movie, my wife unfortunately is injured in some way.
How's she doing, by the way?
Yes. So thanks for asking. For anybody,
has the pain subsided?
For anybody who doesn't know, so my wife fell a couple weeks ago and broke her wrist severely.
In love with you? Oh, right.
That never happened. She fell in like with me, and she's like, "I don't like you fine enough to do it." She there's a whole lot of let's put it this way: our wedding cake said the word "settle," and that was an acronym, and I don't want to. It was really rude. Yeah, so she fell down. We have a raised garden bed, and she fell out of it onto some pavers, and she totally fractured her radius all the way across. It was just. So she had surgery on the 11th, and is doing better now finally, but she was in significant pain from Monday until.
Since you got married.
Yeah.
I kept it going.
Yeah, it is. So.
Well, okay. Glad she's doing better.
So she's getting there.
On behalf of the Book Club for Movies audience, we wish Beth a speedy recovery.
And hey, with that all being said, next week, podcast at bookclubformovies.com. Lights out. Come watch it with us.
Hey, also, the Patreon exists at this point.
What?
So, yeah, go to patreon.com/bookclubformovies. Become a patron.
Become a Patreoner.
If you haven't listened to that special podcast, which I guess made it into the stream before this show, so you may have, go back and listen to that. It's also the introduction video on the Patreon site. Kind of explains why now or ever. And if you're into it, then we're into you.
And if you're not, we could still be into you. Just give us
it's fine.
the
We
high.
still-
Just
still
give us
love
the
you.
high sign. You know, let us know the high sign is the I won't pay you, but you're still there.
Involves demons. This is my wife. Involves demons. Sorry. And for that, I'm out.
and for those reasons, we are out.
See you next week. Goodbye.
Yeah.